Hello, I'm Bill Harris. Thank you for joining us to celebrate the 15th anniversary of Toledo Stories. We're going to be taking a look back at past documentaries in this series and examine the subjects and themes that Toledo Stories has studied, such as people, culture, iconic institutions, community engagements, arts and entertainment, and the overall history of Toledo. Our documentaries have covered subjects ranging from present time all the way back to 1812. These documentaries show how Toledo has evolved throughout the years, whether by the plethora of immigrants moving to the city or how one business altered the makeup of Toledo. Though Toledo Stories is reaching 15 years of age, WGTE Public Media has been on the air since 1952 and has been creating and airing documentaries that serve the Northwest Ohio region well before Toledo Stories even became an idea. The decision was made to include a number of our past shows under the Toledo Stories umbrella. This brings out our past documentaries that serve the mission of the series. That mission is to tell stories about the culture and history of this city. Tonight we're going to start with an example of a documentary series prior to 2002, The Cornerstones. This series started in the mid-90s and examined the ethnic heritage of various areas and neighborhoods of Toledo. They show how the Irish, German, Polish, and African Americans found their way to Toledo and how they shaped the city through business, faith, politics, and culture.
One of the things I think is very important to understand is that ethnicity is the creation of a culture that allows you to be at home in the new society. When they became ethnic, they became American. When they built those churches, they were creating the stone and mortar root that tied them to the soil of the new world. It means they were going to stay.
The Polish immigrants who settled in Kuszwans and Lagrinka sought new lives in America, but longed for the familiarity of their homeland. They found both. The neighborhoods harbored them, nurtured them, and set them on a path to prosperity that helped build the city. The neighborhoods aren't quite the same anymore. Toledo's Polish Americans are more likely to be found in the suburbs than on the streets around St. Hedwig's or St. Anthony's. But wherever they are, they keep Lagrinka and Kuszwans in their hearts. And they are always ready to return, if only briefly, to the sights, the smells, the sounds of the old neighborhoods, just one more time.
I think one of the myths in America is that we came for freedom, we came for religious opportunity. Those things were available in Germany. But most Germans came for simply the matter of a better life. Most of them did not own property, and they were going to be landless peasants or tenant farmers the rest of their days. And here was an opportunity to actually own land, and that was the draw.
And so they came, and they sent letters home describing the adventure. The stories, whether or not they were completely true, forged the links in a chain. Brothers and cousins, sisters and uncles, they followed each other one by one.
Before the railroads linked America's cities, commerce depended upon canals. There were fortunes to be made in the shipping of goods, but the men who dug the ditches saw none of the rewards. The mosquitoes and the squalor claimed 5 men for every mile of canal.
It was tough work. You were up to your waist in mud sometimes, and mosquitoes, black flies. Had to battle malaria. You lost work on rainy days and didn't get paid for it, but you still had deductions for lodging, which was often provided by the contractors. You lived under very crowded conditions, often shanties with 10 or 12 people in them, and bunkhouses with 18, 19 men. Many of the fights that occurred on the canals were due to the bad working conditions, because sometimes contractors didn't pay the wages, and so some of this was really an early manifestation of labor unrest rather than just the Irish liking a fight.
I can remember my grandfather telling me of a white-owned store, a rather large store within the black community that did not have black folk working there. Representative from NAACP and clergy met with the man and indicated what they wanted. And he indicated that that was his practice and he wasn't going to change it. And so the religious community came together and they established a boycott. Walked around that store and no one went into it. Some folks that went into it, as they came out of the store and passed the little alleyway, there was a little serious discussion about the fact that they shouldn't do that again. It wasn't too many weeks before that store owner on a Sunday sent word to the minister that he was ready to sit down and negotiate, to which there was a reply that this is the Sabbath. I don't do business. The following Monday, the hiring pattern was changed.
Though not officially under the Cornerstone banner, Islamic Toledo tells a similar story of immigrants from Syria and Lebanon coming to the United States to find work and prosperity. These immigrants build upon the diverse foundation of Toledo and add another wrinkle to the culture of this city. This documentary shows the history and impact that the Islamic people have had on the city, including the first mosque to come to Ohio. Though history has tested the relationship between the Islamic people and the United States, the bond of unity between Toledo and its Islamic citizens has never been stronger.
Here in the Toledo area, I think that if anything, the tragedy of 9/11 led to a strengthening of ties between the Muslim and the non-Muslim community.
One of the radio stations in town start telling people that come to the Islamic Center to show your support.
And we ended up postponing it about half an hour. And I said, well, why aren't we starting? And they said, well, we just got a phone call and traffic is lined up for a mile in Perrysburg with people trying to get here.
I was amazed by the community of Toledo. When they all came together, joined hand in hand in a circle around the whole mosque, that was
about 3,000 people showed up, all different Christian denominations.
Quite a moment.
And they all hold hand, and that was really unbelievable.
We prayed together for all the souls of the people.
But instead of looking inwardly toward the center, they looked all outwardly in a very symbolic thing, and that was that we would protect this place. When we saw that, it was overwhelming, seeing that wonderful, wonderful gesture of support.
The Cornerstone series, as well as Islamic Toledo, provides a cultural background on the city and the influence these immigrants have had on Toledo. But what about the influence from just one person? Toledo has seen its fair share of fascinating characters throughout the years. Great athletes, inventors, artists have at one point called Toledo their home. These individuals have made an impact on the city, and Toledo Stories has highlighted a few of these remarkable individuals. While one person set an athletic feat that will most likely never be topped, another wrote a series of books that would become world-renowned and inspire a new generation of readers. What do they both have in common? Well, there is more to them than their fame.
Everything is a team to me. I mean, family's a team. Sports is a team. Business work is a team. And if we get all these teams working and functioning together, we would have a better society. I mean, and by building on that, I think that those are the things that were very important to me.
I mean, he was teaching me lessons. He didn't even know I existed. And he was teaching me some of the most valuable lessons of life.
Chuck Ely was born to be great, and that's what he is. He's a fine football player and a fine person along with it, and I think you can't ask for more than that.
But the real reason why he was great is because of his character, of his leadership, of his ability to show compassion for his fellow man.
Chuck Ely always showed respect. Showed respect for the game, respect for his teammates, respect for his family. He also showed respect to the opponents.
That's all you want. Bring on the best. You know, and I think Chuck and the Toledo Rockets helped make me a better player.
And he went on, and all he did was he kept winning, which is all that Chuck Ely ever has done. He just kept winning.
I didn't think I was going to ever inspire anyone. I never dreamed that would be a result. I get from lawyers and doctors and in all walks of life, they say that I inspired them to go on and become success in their careers. That's rather gratifying.
It's a particular pleasure to know that Mildred Wirt was so much like this character. Finding out that there's no real Carolyn Keene, the pen name used for the series, has been somewhat disappointing. But it has given a lot of people a great deal of joy to know that there was a real Carolyn Keene, at least for the first 20 years or so, and that she really was very much like this character that she wrote. It wasn't all just a fantasy. To a lot of Nancy Drew fans, this is sort of the cherry on top of the sundae, knowing that the real author is such an admirable woman in her own right.
Chuck Ely and Millie Benson are just a few of the famous names that have gone through Toledo, but there are other groups of people who have had a bigger impact on the city but are not as well known. In 2007, Toledo Stories did a documentary on the Toledo Diocese and what it contributes to the city. This might sound shocking, but they're just like any other person in Toledo who wants to contribute to their community. They provide a great deal of services like education, home health, and even reconstruction. Hearts of Fire shows how these sisters have helped the people of Toledo.
Some people, maybe they're not interested in religious life, but they have a misconception that sisters pray all day and our life is very serious. We work all the time. But by spending time with us, people see that we're normal people. We have fun, we have celebrations, we do work hard, but we're supporting one another in our ministry.
While I've changed ministries, would have never dreamt of doing some of the things I've done, the community, because of its calling me to do that, has just expanded my world wonderfully. While some people think religious life is very confining and boring, I have yet to discover that.
Toledo has not only been shaped by the people, but by their institutions. When you ask someone what are some good places to visit in Toledo, you get a variety of answers. You most likely get suggestions to visit the zoo, the Museum of Art, the multitude of metro parks, just to name a few. Toledo Stories have visited these places to tell their stories and how they have impacted Toledo, some more than once. Our first stop will be an institution that embodies the pride that the people have for their city. A history short of wins but long with tradition and history, this twice-lost team has created memories for anyone who has ever attended one of their games. Let's buy some peanuts and Cracker Jacks and take a look at the history of the Mud Hens.
Baseball, the American pastime. It's been an integral part of life in Toledo for over 100 years. Even though championships have been few and far between, we've cheered the home team through season after season. One pennant would fade and tatter in the time it took to win the next. But during those long intervening summers, it was the game that really mattered, not the winning or losing. We gave baseball Moses Fleetwood Walker, the first black player in the major leagues, some 60 years before Jackie Robinson. Toledo's Roger Bresnahan invented the pads that protect today's catchers during his Hall of Fame career with the New York Giants. And Casey Stengel brought a championship to town before moving on to the major leagues to do the same in New York. But above all else, Toledo gave baseball the Mud Hens.
Mud Hen baseball, or the Toledo Mud Hens, is probably one of the first names you think of when you think of minor league baseball. If you took a poll of 100 people and said, name me 5 minor league baseball teams, they're going to probably name 4 in their area and the Toledo Mud Hens. I mean, that's just the way I think people think of Toledo as a minor league franchise.
Just like the Mud Hens, this next institution has been entrenched in Toledo for over 100 years. The Toledo Zoo has seen changes in how a zoo should operate, from treating animals as just playthings and attractions for people to really putting forth the effort in conservation and care for the animals. These next 2 documentaries show the very humble beginnings of the zoo and the alterations it has made to gain a huge following within the community, all while still embracing its history.
Well, the story goes that the first animal at the Toledo Zoo was a woodchuck. It was donated by Carl Hillebrand, a furniture dealer from South Toledo. And he donated it because the thing got loose in his store one day and just started tearing the place up. Woodchucks are rodents. They probably like to eat furniture. He couldn't have it in his store anymore, but he didn't want to kill it. So he gave it to Walbridge Park with the idea of starting a zoo.
The role of modern zoos has evolved, from human entertainment to animal preservation, and now to more active involvement in conservation efforts, both around the world and in our own backyard.
In 2003, after a brief resurgence, the Cahansi spray toad disappeared in the wild. In a shocking turn of events, the assurance populations in the zoos also crashed, placing these amazing animals on the verge of extinction. It was the Toledo Zoo that discovered the methodology to successfully breed the Cahansi spray toad in captivity, ultimately re-releasing them into the wild.
Here we are in Toledo. The fact that we have such a great zoo and the support of the local citizens allowed us to build a facility in the museum, amazing amphibians that have biosecure facilities that allow us to reproduce spray toads. So you can see, okay, what is necessary for us to go ahead and reproduce, maintain, and manage Cahansi spray toads here at the zoo.
From time to time, you will sometimes hear Toledo being referred to as the Glass City. Now, why is that? Well, the glass industry gave Toledo its identity. It all began with Edward Libby moving his business, later named the Libby Glass Company, here to Toledo in the late 1800s. This set in motion a number of glass businesses that would begin here in Toledo. Edward Libby was also the founder of the Toledo Museum of Art, a long-standing staple of Toledo and one of the best art museums in the world. It was also through the museum that we see the birth of the glass art movement. The two documentaries that Toledo Stories produced for the museum, A Centennial Portrait and The House That Glass Built, go beyond just the did you know facts and the basic history of Toledo Museum of Art and the glass industry. They also give insight on how they are important to the people of Toledo and vice versa.
Everything we have done, everything we do and hope to do is a reflection of the fundamental task of preserving and strengthening the collection. This collection has meant many things to many people. Men and women by the thousands have enriched their lives from it. Many more thousands have widened and deepened their knowledge from it. To some, the collection has been a source of consolation. To others, inspiration. It has been used as a proud cultural monument with which to identify and characterize our city to the world. This brings me to one thing every one of us can take from the magnificent collections of the Toledo Museum of Art. That thing is faith.
Museums in America are changing. No longer are they just a place to see the final product of the creative process. The Glass Pavilion's transparent walls allow visitors to look into other galleries.
It's such a dramatic process, and it's such an elemental process. I mean, it is fire, it is earth, it is labor. At the same time, when you see these elements brought together, it's almost transporting you into a past time. That really is, I think, the heart of the pavilion, is to be able to see the process, to see how these basic elements are universal. And these basic elements have been part of this art form from the ancient world to the present, and will be far into the future, because it comes down to sand, fire, and muscle.
So far, we have seen how these institutions have built and influenced Toledo. They have united us to tighten our bond within the community and increase the pride we have for the city. It's almost as if we are family. Speaking of family, this next doc tells the story of a renowned family business in Toledo the Andersons. This business has gone through a number of changes and tribulations throughout the years, and Toledo Stories gives us a timeline view of how they went from starting out with just one truck to growing into the publicly traded company it is today. In this three-part series, we get a glimpse of the success and setbacks that this family has faced in their professional and personal lives.
Once a week we had a conference of what our aims were and how well we were doing about it. We would suggest to each other what we thought we could see the other could correct, and those meetings were very fruitful.
I think they worked as a team. Mom and Dad took parenthood pretty seriously, I can tell you that. They did it by the book. They discussed things regularly, were never disagreed in front of us, always presented a united front. And if Mom said it was okay, then Dad said it was okay.
Toledo is home to some of the best metro parks in Ohio. From Wildwood to the Oak Openings, the metro parks of Toledo are places that you just can't find anywhere else. It has some of the most beautiful scenery and contains some of the rarest plants in the United States. It is also unique to the other metro parks of Ohio by being home to a number of historically significant landmarks, specifically Wildwood Manor. These documentaries tell great stories of how Toledo Metro Parks first started, as well as how the Wildwood campaign was successful in saving the park and preserving the Wildwood Manor House. It shows us why it's important to save these lands and the benefits that come with it, both environmentally and economically. The Metro Parks of Toledo really adds a unique color to the city.
When you ask folks to describe what is a metro park, you'll get a number of answers, and you'll get a number of different values that come forward. Things like the manor house, or perhaps the gardens or the landscaping around the manor house. Some people come specifically just to use the trails, either for nature walks and hiking or walking. Folks identify themselves from where they come from, and a park like Wildwood is a part of where people come from. And so when you've got the historical story of the Stranahans, the historical story of how this property was acquired, the ecological significance of this relationship of the sand dunes and the oak openings, that relationship spills over into Wildwood, the history associated with Ottawa River, all of those things factor in, but it comes together as a totality that it will be here forever.
Conservation groups are well aware of the threat to the region. As part of a 1997 campaign to raise public awareness, the Nature Conservancy released a list of the last 200 great places on Earth. Included in that list was the Oak Openings region of Northwest Ohio. This announcement surprised many local people who had lived in the area their whole lives, but never understood its environmental significance.
There are very few of these quality areas that remain, especially here in Northwest Ohio. This is the only one in Northwest Ohio, and there's only a handful here in the Midwest. The Oak Openings is just as special in its own way as the Everglades in Florida or the Redwood Forest out in California. Each of these types of ecosystems has real value, and in the Oak Openings region you have some of the rarest habitat that remains in Ohio, and we've focused a lot of our work on acquiring land so that we can preserve it for future generations and to preserve the biodiversity there.
It's important because pretty soon these preserves are all that's going to be left. That's why doing as much as we can today, acquiring as much land, managing it properly, that's the best thing we can leave future generations, without a doubt.
We have a window the next 10 years to do a lot of acquisition, so if we do that right, that will really paint the character of this area for a long time.
There's only so much land that is available, and this is one thing that you can't make any more of. So we have to be activists and very aggressive with preserving land.
We are not just looking at
yesterday and today and tomorrow. What we're thinking about is 20 years from now, 30 years from now, 40 years from now.
When it comes to preservation, if you don't get it when it's available, you lose it. If you don't get it for the citizens to use, it's developed or something else happens to it. So what we do now will help generations be able to enjoy something that would be lost forever.
These stories showcase the institutions still thriving in Toledo today. If you wanted to, you could turn off your TV and take a trip to these places right now, but selfishly, we would encourage you to at least wait until after this program is over. These are not the only institutions to have shaped Toledo, however. There are businesses from Toledo's past that have helped to give the Glass City its identity. Once upon a time, there was a store that was a go-to stop for everything that you wanted or needed. Even if you weren't planning to buy anything that day, the coffee aroma would still lure you into the store. Once you were inside, you would see everything from food to clothes and even a carnival. They even had a saying for people who wanted to visit their friends at this location: meet me at Tidkey's.
Ask your neighbors about their most recent shopping trip, and chances are they won't remember much. Stores these days are all about the same. But ask Toledoans of a certain age about the last time they shopped at Tidkey's, and it's a whole different story.
The initial impact, obviously, was the aromas. The moment you walked into the store, here were these magnificent aromas hitting you, and they were smells that other stores would try to disguise. Tidkey's, whether they were doing it with intent or not, used these as a sales tool. I don't even drink coffee. I would have gone back to buy some of that great smelling coffee.
It was sort of like, as you walked in, it was going like a circus or a carnival midway, of walking down with all the hawkers and all the things, everything going on.
So let's all go down to Tidkey's. It's fun to shop at Tidkey's. The values are great at 408 at Tidkey's, Tidkey's, Tidkey's. Your wonderful family store.
Come on, let's go down to Tidkey's.
Toledo's nightlife back in the day was, for lack of a better term, hopping. There was no shortage of activities you could partake of, from going out to the movies at the Paramount to grabbing dinner at Quinoa Low. And if you really felt adventurous, you could dance the night away at the Trianon. The citizens of Toledo during this period have saved and archived some of their favorite memories at these places. These memories of love and fun are forever left in their minds as they look back fondly to yesteryear. When you ask someone how they would describe this period in their life, they would tell you that it was filled with some of the best nights of their life.
I went downtown and I went into LaSalle's and bought a little pocket package of Kleenex, which was probably a nickel then, or maybe even less, and went across the street to the Paramount by myself to see the movie An Affair to Remember with Deborah Carr and Cary Grant. The reason I did the Kleenex was because someone told me I would cry, and I did, and I still remember seeing that movie. I can almost feel myself sitting in the seat at the Paramount and watching Cary Grant and Deborah Carr in that movie. It was wonderful. It's still wonderful.
Later on in life, I've had the opportunity to go to some very exquisite restaurants. I measure the quality of service based on my experience at Quinoa Low's when I was 16, 17 years old. That's the kind of impression it made upon us and how we were treated.
Well, Trianon, I think if you had a quarter, you could have $2 worth of enjoyment. You could dance, you could meet friends. If you had a nickel, you could buy a soft drink.
And the funny thing is, we had just as many good times when we didn't have nothing as we are today when there are the means to do better. We still enjoy it. We appreciate it. Let's make it that way. I'll tell you the truth, I wouldn't mind going there right now. But I don't know if my wife will give me a permit or not.
Toledo Stories has even gone outside the Northwest Ohio region for some of their documentaries. Body by Fisher tells the story of how the Fisher brothers came to be one of the biggest names and most important innovators in the Detroit automotive industry. Their humble beginnings started out in Norwalk, Ohio, working in a carriage shop until the two eldest brothers packed up to Detroit and started changing how the automobile should look. Their emblem, Body by Fisher, would eventually become a staple in the United States automobile.
Well, next to the automobile emblems themselves, the Fisher body emblem, I think, is one of the most recognized emblems in the automobile industry. And the logo is a Napoleonic coach, so not necessarily a coach owned by Napoleon, but one of that era. And I think it suggests a couple of things, in some ways subtly and in some ways very overtly. You know, it suggests that this car is luxurious.
And it was a time when royalty was going away, and yet during the 20s, there was really quite, it was the Gadsby era. So there were the nouveau riche, the young royals who had come up and kind of taken over that spot. And I think there was a natural tie to that element of quality and royalty that they were able to get out of that emblem.
For years and years, into the 80s, even the 1990s, that Fisher logo continued to appear on cars, most famously on the door sill there. And to me, that was always something that set GM apart from its competitors.
These documentaries show how different people, cultures, and institutions have shaped Toledo. But what about Toledo's influence in shaping the United States? The Toledo region was an area of interest in the War of 1812, as well as an important spot for the Underground Railroad. The War of 1812 in the Old Northwest examines the battles between the U.S. and the alliance of the natives and British. This battle for the Old Northwest really sets the stage for the formation of the United States.
At Fallen Timbers, Anthony Wayne and the Legion of the United States meet the Confederated tribes that have banned to oppose United States settlement west, north, and west of the Ohio River.
The British and the Americans meet separately and draw the U.S.-Canadian boundary through the Great Lakes where it is right now. And the Native Americans find that all of the land that they thought they had been promised by the British at the end of the war, that is, all the lands north of the Ohio River, are now ceded away by the British to the Americans.
The battle lasts only a short time. As a matter of fact, it lasts such a short time that Anthony Wayne, at the battle's end, is convinced that he's only gone through a preliminary skirmish and halts his army before following up his victory, convinced that he's being lured into a trap. But the battle was actually over, with enormous consequences for the future history of the United States.
The War of 1812 in the Old Northwest gives great details about the importance of Northwest Ohio, as well as the roles of the major figures during the war. The next documentary deals with more of the local players, both overseas and right in the heart of Toledo during World War II. Those stories of the Second World War are told in the home front. We learned about the heroics of the 192nd Battalion, as well as the hard work put forth toward the war effort at Libby Owens Ford, the Toledo Tank Depot, the Erie Proving Ground, and other local businesses. The building of the World War II monument in Washington and how Toledo has had its hand in the process is also highlighted. Join us as we look back at the work and sacrifices provided by the greatest generation.
Not much is really said, about the home front during the war in history. We read about the battles and the soldiers who won the war, but certainly the home front was instrumental in our industrial production, which really gave us an advantage on the battlefield.
During that war, it was so different than any other time because everybody was out to win that war.
Like our soldiers and sailors, the folks at home did their part, out of an altruistic sense of patriotism and duty.
There's so much here. I mean, this was really the symbol of what the United States was at the time. We can be proud of the services of our soldiers and the many thousands of others who were in all branches of the service. The people who worked in the factories, building the arms and equipment. and certainly our agricultural might. All these were harnessed to a degree that has never been done before. I think Ohioans can be very proud of our part in World War II.
Holy Toledo! What does that even mean? If you ask 5 different people, you'd get 5 different answers. This next documentary, Holy Toledo, takes the term in a more religious sense. Now, Toledo Stories doesn't just cover war in the history category, they examine faith. A lot of the first major goals of the early Irish, German, and Polish immigrants were to build churches in their faith and nationality. You would be hard-pressed not to find a religious institution when traveling through Toledo, whether it be Catholic, Baptist, Lutheran, or even Islamic. Toledo runs through the gamut of such institutions, and this documentary takes us through the history and architecture of the worship centers of Toledo.
First Presbyterian Church of Maumee is the oldest church building in Northwest Ohio. The congregation was founded in 1820. The town of Maumee donated property for the church that was once the site of a British gun battery during the War of 1812. The interior has been renovated over the years, but still retains its simple Puritan charm, reminiscent of churches in New England. A new sanctuary was built in 1969 to accommodate the growing congregation, but the original building still serves as a chapel.
There is a rich history of arts and entertainment in Toledo. Just the museum alone is an artistic achievement that any other city would kill for. But the arts in Toledo goes beyond the museum. It has been said that you're not really a city unless you have your own orchestra. That was the mindset when the Toledo Symphony was conceived and brought to life. Music Among Us shows the start of the Toledo Symphony as well as the history and overall importance of music.
But really, what is the point of a resident orchestra? Why bother assembling one at all? Other than that exalted civic pride of an earlier day, is there a reason for the years of work, the struggle, one financial crisis after another, finding musicians, hiring conductors, recruiting armies of volunteers to carry out endless fundraising events? Why do intelligent civic leaders commit themselves to so much work? Because human beings need music. Music reaches down into our very heart and soul and pulls out feelings we didn't know we had. Music can echo our sorrow and give voice to our joy. Music can console us. Music can cheer us up. Music can inspire us. We march to music. We worship with music. We marry amidst music. It is impossible to imagine a world without music.
Not a lot of people realize just how much work an artist puts into their craft. There's so much time, energy, and dedication put forth into practice and preparation on a daily basis. And that doesn't include the actual performance itself. Now, that hard work also includes bringing in the arts and artists into the city. Music Among Us shows the effort it took to bring in an orchestra to Toledo. However, when it comes to hard work and the amount of time you put into your craft and the sacrifices you have to make to succeed in your art, you'll be hard-pressed to find anyone that works harder than dancers. Jazz, ballet, you name it, this is an art form that demands everything from you, physically and mentally. Reverence shows the daily grind of a dancer in the Toledo Ballet.
There's a lot of pressure. It's just all stressful, but then I like to think of dance as like a place to let go, but then it's also a lot of hard work. They don't get it until they watch me, and then they're like, oh my God, you actually are good.
It really has to be for the love of it. Do you really want to do this? Do you really want to make this your life? Eventually, when you're around other dancers that have trained like you have trained, everybody can do these things that are the technique you learn in class. You are the only thing that you can offer that nobody else in the world can offer, and so you have to bring yourself to the dance.
I know I'm good, but I know I'm always going to be working and I'm always going to be pushing for the next level. You realize how many good dancers there are. If you're the best at your studio, you're not necessarily the best somewhere else.
You have to have talent, natural talent, but a lot of it is how much work you're willing to do.
A lot of hard work and dedication was put into creating and maintaining the Toledo Ballet. That same effort was also put in place when the first radio station came to Toledo, WSPD. They would later bring in the first TV station into the city as well. Television really changed the game in Toledo. It changed the game in the entire world, really. But it wasn't quite the overnight sensation as one might have expected. This documentary explores the early days of radio and the transition later to television in Toledo. It also focuses on how local advertising played a role in television and how TV personalities weren't so much celebrities, but family.
I did commercials for Lane Drugs. They were selling an inexpensive, I won't use the word cheap, an inexpensive waterproof wristwatch. And the idea was, in the opening commercial of the program, I would sing the praises of this wristwatch. And then right at the end of that commercial, I would put it down in a fishbowl full of water. And when they came out to the closing commercial, I would take the watch out of the fishbowl, and it would still be running. One night, doing this, and we were about to come out the last commercial, and I looked down, and I couldn't quite see whether it was running or not. And George Fulop was the cameraman, and he was in real close, racking his lens in to get a tight close-up of it. And I said, George, don't get too close. I think the damn thing stopped. And just then I realized there was total silence in the studio, which meant that the film was over and the microphone was on. And I just was, well, what do you know, it hasn't. What else are you going to say?
Looking back, Toledo's first newscasts weren't the most sophisticated things on TV, but then again, we weren't the most sophisticated audience. We've changed since then, and the news has too, but it's nice to remember simpler times when TV was young in Toledo, and so were the people who built it.
I'm very much aware that these guys built the foundation. They were there when television first went on the air. We're just carriers of the torch. They built the foundation. They put Channel 13 and Channel 11 on the map in this town. And we're just here, in my opinion, to try to uphold the standards.
This last section of the special will showcase certain stories of a subject that WGTE strives to succeed in, community engagement. These documentaries have highlighted a wide range of organizations and the services they provide. Stories about the Adoption Network, the Toledo Fair Housing Center, the Cherry Street Mission are just a handful of examples of what has been covered on the Toledo Stories. This first documentary is about a family that innovated the way we take care of special needs children and the home that has been created for them.
Welcome to Welcome Travelers. Today you'll meet a couple who have dedicated their lives to God's forgotten children. Meet Mr. and Mrs. Roy Engler, who live in Maumee, Ohio, a suburb of Toledo. They live in a small haven for mentally retarded children, which they manage on a 24-hour-a-day basis. Mrs. Engler, this work must be very difficult for you and your husband.
No, we love this work. This is our life. We felt that we had to help somebody else.
The Englers were pioneers in many ways.
no child would be placed in a crib and left unattended. They needed to be in a family environment, and she would hand feed them and take care of them.
And she had her own thoughts about how the place was to be cleaned and how each child was to be taken care of, and fresh air. She would open up the windows every afternoon for a couple hours, no matter what the temperature was outdoors.
And in the winter months, when we couldn't take them out, we would put their coats on, their gloves on, their scarves, open up all of the windows so we can let the fresh air in. That's how she done things.
So what is the takeaway from this documentary? Well, we learned that the keys to properly care for the children has to do with both adding a great amount of love to the children and the environment they are in. As we have seen, that job is easier said than done. It is a job that requires a lot of work and hours of devotion, but with an end result that makes it all worthwhile. That same love and affection is also provided by the parents who have adopted children. This next documentary explores the Adopt America Network and what their mission is. The stories highlighted in this doc will show that adoption has changed the lives of both the children and the parents.
The greatest thing was to actually have somebody to come and adopt me. That's the greatest thing, because at the time, I wasn't the brightest or the smartest or the best kid on the block, but I was pretty bad. I was a real bad dude, but it was having somebody there who looked through all that little bad stuff and still saw some good in me. And he took it upon himself to adopt me.
I was with my son through a lot of things, through getting in trouble with the law, through being locked up and being in prison, and through selling drugs. Gotten so bad one time he had even begun selling drugs in front of our house on Sunday morning of all days. And I'm a minister, so that really hurt my heart. But something always told me deep inside, you can't give up. You can't turn your back on him. And I didn't. Through all the name calling, through all the anger, and I look at him today and I say to myself sometimes, what would have happened had I given up on my son? Where would he be? Or would he even be alive? And the rewards for adoption are much, much greater than the negative. If we can only get America to realize that.
There are many examples of pure love that enrich and change the lives of both parents and children throughout that documentary. Cherry Street Mission is not only an example of pure love, but of faith, service, and altruism as well. They started in 1947 as a way to take care of the homeless in Toledo. 70 years later, they're still going strong. We get a glimpse of the day-to-day operation of Cherry Street, as well as the steps that they are taking to help the homeless in Toledo get back on their feet. This doc shows the growth that Cherry Street has seen over the years and the lives that have been changed by the mission.
They started a soup kitchen, where back in the 1940s and 1950s, the term soup kitchen really did emerge. Soup kitchens were commonly held in central city locations around the country just to tide people over between meals. Our founders sold everything and committed themselves to helping and serving people. And I think that's both our heritage, but it's also a bit of our ancestry. It seems as though we still attract people that serve here that have reached a point in their life where they're willing to abandon some things in order to gain other things.
When I came to Cherry Street Mission, I thought I was coming to cook. Long story short, I wasn't brought here just to cook. I believe that somewhere along the line, God has put in me, God has put on me that desire to help people.
Father God, I ask that you take this food and not only nourish our guests' body, but their spirits and our souls. With all this, I ask Amen.
Amen.
As you can probably tell, service work like running an adoption center, a homeless shelter, and a home for people with developmental disabilities isn't exactly a cakewalk. But at the very least, when you work in community service, you don't have anyone working against you. The entire community is on your side. Well, not so fast. Community service isn't always love. It's sometimes a battle that the Toledo Fair Housing Center fights every day. This next documentary deals with the Fair Housing Act and the impact it has had on Toledo. Because of Toledo Fair Housing, changes have been made to make housing fairer for minorities in Toledo. We also see the overall implementation of the Fair Housing Act during the Civil Rights era and the attempts to undermine fair housing. Toledo Fair Housing Center has done a great deal of work to fight this form of housing discrimination and continues to do so today.
The realtor only took me to the low poverty areas, and I began to scratch my head like, what are you doing? Why are you only taking me to the low poverty areas?
These folks that come to you, sometimes they come to you because they have no other avenue to go to. And it's such a personal, important thing to them to be able to have a house that they want to live in and where they want to live.
I wanted to get help. I knew I needed to get help. And I said, out of everything that I've been through, because I've been through a whole lot, trying not to cry.
And you can talk to them and you can see, even though they're trying to hold back the tears, men, women, the tears welling up. So it becomes something that not only do you want to enforce the law on their behalf, but you want to do it in a way that they have confidence in the system.
They were with me all the way. They helped me through it. And I was able to move from the bad neighborhood into a better place for me and my son.
There are a lot of serious examples of community engagement and heavy stories from various individuals across these documentaries. Community engagement doesn't just have to be on the serious side, however. It can be a fair amount of fun as well, all while still contributing back to your community and feel as though you are part of something greater than yourself. This documentary showcases a great number of people that contributed to a week of high-energy live television, the TV30 auction. Sometimes there were individuals that would only volunteer for this event, but they were always viewed as part of the family. Watch, bid, buy the TV30 Auction Rewind, where great friends and memories were made.
Well, it was hugely successful in terms of public awareness. That's true. And we had enormous support from local businesses of all sizes.
Most of the people that donated the auction were really happy to do it and liked and enjoyed watching it and really wanted to participate, so it was an easy thing to do.
And they did get their names mentioned all the time. I mean, it wasn't just once an hour.
Well, and they'd come down and do the telephones, and
yes.
You know, like the OI crew would always have OI T-shirts on.
Yes,
with
right.
Pink Panthers on them. You know, and we all had Pink Panthers we'd be playing with. And propped up in front of all the boards.
And then some people, I think, when I called for the donors that were just cash donors, in a sense, to help with the production costs, they would be, oh yeah, definitely, expecting your call, happy to give.
And again, I think because the auction became so popular, merchants knew that this was good business because you would get free advertising, and we always promoted these companies.
Local people donated that stuff. Local people were bidding on it and buying it, and local people were taking the bids and auctioning. It was just a local event.
Toledo Stories has been a staple for WGTE for 15 years. It has brought back to life past documentaries that have highlighted and archived Toledo's past, and it has also given us an opportunity to explore new stories that are within the Glass City. There is a lot to love about Toledo: the zoo, the mud hens, the museum, all these institutions that have given Toledo its identity. But Toledo Stories has also shown us that this city is more than just these tourist attractions, but it is also a melting pot of heritage and faith. These people that have come to Toledo have instilled pride within the city, and that pride is put to goodwill through community action and charitable work. There's a lot to look forward to in Toledo's future, and we'll be there to tell the story. Thank you for watching.